What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video about Stray Blade, a third-person action RPG with a bit of metroidvania and Souls-like elements. Though I would say personally, I think this one leans a bit more in on the action-adventure side. But right here at the beginning of the video, this one is uploading a little later than normal, and that is because I received a copy of this game, which is releasing today, from the publisher via a PR company working for them, but I received it literally yesterday, and at the time of this video I've only played about 5 hours of it. Though I will say I've enjoyed those hours enough that I've decided I'm going to review this one, though it might take me a little while as I'm already busy with some other stuff. But from there, let's actually dive into this, talk about the game, what it has to offer, and everything else you can expect. We will be playing as Farron West, an adventurer and an explorer who has been traveling for years and years, who has set their sights on discovering the mysteries of the lost Valley of Acrea, which at the beginning of the game we have found. We've just arrived there. But upon coming into contact with a spire of sorts, we are thrown back in an explosion where a stone is embedded in our chest. Shortly after waking up, we run into a small, what the game calls a wolf, named Boji, who acts as our companion, who also explains to us that because we have this stone in our chest, if we try to leave the valley, we will absolutely die, which means the only way we can sever the connection and get out of here is to reach a person at the middle of the spire, which is going to require us to navigate the valley itself, which used to be home to a mysterious race of giants who practiced a form of almost magic thanks to 3 types of seemingly magical ore that the valley was home to. Story-wise, that's about all I've got for you, which is pretty much the basic setup for the title. So let's talk some gameplay and other mechanics you can expect, much of which revolves around navigating your way through what I would call a semi-open world, sort of Metroidvania-esque experience. There are roughly 4 large maps you can load into that you can travel freely between, provided you've opened the path to them, and as you move between these areas, you'll be fighting various enemies trying to get in your way. And pursuing the story will lead you to extra powers and abilities that will then open up more previously inaccessible areas to you, allowing you to explore and find various secrets that can contribute even more to your overall progression. The game aims to be a challenging experience, but there are various difficulty modes you can pick right at the start of the game, sort of easy to ultra hard, which mostly dictates how good you need to be at navigating the game's combat system. The actual combat is probably what I'd consider a bit Souls-like, though on normal difficulty, which is what I've been playing on so far, it's frankly a bit easy, and you can definitely get to a point where you're just demolishing stuff before it has time to engage in the sort of parry and dodge system they've set up. Though I imagine higher difficulties would probably address that at least a little bit, which will be something I keep an eye on when I actually review it. But enemies on screen when they move to attack will typically flash either red or blue. However, it's not the flash you're looking for, it is their actual movement. What the flash of color represents is actually whether or not you need to dodge or parry. For those who have problems with color blindness, there are options to sort of set up a visual indicator of this instead of the actual color, which shows up as an icon above the character's head. But what you're actually watching for is the physical movement of the enemy, because they will flash well before they attack, and if you move too soon, you'll get hit anyway. But when they flash red, you need to dodge out of the way, or when they flash blue, you need to parry. If they're just not able to hit you with the attack due to something like distance, that will also save you from being hit. That, though, I would say is the core mechanic. However, as you play the game, you'll be able to find more and more types of weapons. You'll start off with a sort of basic sword, and then as you find forges, you'll be able to craft new weapons once you find the blueprints as well as the crafting materials from defeating enemies. And then when you craft these new weapons, they can give you more ways to approach the combat, with many of them having various stats like speed, range, etc. So many of them behave quite differently. And while you'll have access to a variety of more normal weapons, once you get a little farther into the game, you'll also get access to sort of special weapons, which I've only found one of yet, and they require a special arcane forge to actually make. However, even if you find a weapon you like and want to stick with it, you should forge and use use every weapon at least a little bit because your weapons are somewhat tied to your skill progression. As you kill various enemies, you'll be leveling up, and upon level up, you'll gain a skill point. However, there's only like 5 or 6 actual abilities you can spend those skill points on right away, with many of the others being tied to weapon progression, which is an interesting way of doing it because every weapon you have or can gain access to has a mastery level associated with it. That is to say, you've used it in combat a bit and killed some enemies. This is not a particularly high bar to clear. However, once you max out that sort of minimum status, you'll gain access to a skill point that you can then purchase. Once that skill point is purchased, it's just a passive increase for your character, period, regardless of whether or not you have the weapon equipped. So because of this, we have an incentive to move our weapons around, try different things, which is aided a bit further by the rune system. One of the perks of getting better mastery with a weapon, which again is very easy, is that you gain access to rune slots for that weapon. A little ways into the story, we gain access to rune crafting as well as some magical abilities. The runes are consumable items of sorts that are attached to your weapon. They'll do various things like knock enemies back if they hit you, increase your crit chance, restore health on a finishing move, that kind of thing. However, they only last a set number of charges, so you'll find crafting materials out in the world, craft a rune, use it for a few charges, and then potentially craft it again when the time is right, which keeps you sort of interacting with it, which I thought was kind of a nice touch. However, runes and your magical abilities are actually the purview of Boji, our companion of sorts, which is the small wolf-like creature. As you find various artifacts around the world, you'll gain lore points, and you can upgrade your runes and these abilities with the lore points. Upgrading your runes allows them to last for longer charges, and upgrading the magical abilities has all sorts of effects, like cost reduction, bigger AoEs, etc. So there's a decent amount of progression systems here, and this is on top of crafting things like armor and weapons, but the armor in particular seems like straight upgrades. So far, everything I've found has just been definitively better than the previous thing. But they did add a customization option here where in the menus you can dye your current armor set as well as your weapons, various colors, and one of the rewards for exploration is finding new colors of dye to use, which so far early on has been a pretty fun experience. We can use all of these armaments, let's say, to make an attempt to quickly break the enemy's poise. The white bar under their health bar represents their current poise. If you reduce that to 0, you can finish them off with an instant kill. And if you bring it down to wherever the arrow is at, you'll stagger the enemy for a second, which adds an extra layer on top of the dodge and parry system, which is further complicated when you start fighting more than one enemy at a time. Against one enemy, that's pretty easy, but against several, it gets a little more complicated. And in addition to the main story bosses, there are a handful of sort of optional bosses hidden away in some of the more open areas that you can track down and who have various effects and extra moves you don't see regular enemies with. But more than anything on the combat, it has a lot of weight to it. It really does feel like what you're doing in the moment matters, especially against various enemies, and how you approach that is relevant, and what weapon and everything you're using makes an impact. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out on higher difficulties, but even here on normal, it's a lot of fun to engage with. So the combat combined with exploring the world, which is pretty rewarding, while learning about this sort of strange civilization, all makes for a pretty good time, at least at face value. And for a game I didn't even know about until yesterday, I'm having quite a bit of fun with it. With my only real complaints right now being that sometimes it feels like the controls just stop working, at least the attack button that is, and while I initially thought maybe I was just running out of stamina, after testing it a little bit, occasionally, even when I still had stamina to use, which dictates your ability to attack and dodge, all the usual stuff, the attack button was still unresponsive, and I would have to do either a special attack or a heavy attack to be able to then use it again, which was just a weird little problem I had. And then there's a variety of minor bugs. While I would say most of the experience was pretty solid, no real issues, at least major stuff, there were a variety of minor problems with enemies kind of pathing a little strangely or getting stuck, making them easy to kill, or just the enemy in general seeming to sort of bug out and stop responding, things like that. Though nothing that really hurt the experience in any meaningful way, at least for me. So I think that is pretty much everything I've got for you in terms of Stray Blade at the moment. The information they sent along with the copy of the game tells me that they are releasing this at $35 US, and in addition to PC, should be coming out on current gen consoles as well. That is to say, PlayStation 5 and Xbox X and S. Though I would tell you personally, I'm not so sure $35 is a good price for this yet. I feel like I'm about a third of the way through the game if I'm understanding it correctly, and I'm about 5 hours in. So I would say for me, it's really going to depend on how the experience pans out over the rest of the game, if the progression gets boring, if I start seeing enemies repeat, that kind of thing. Because while I've enjoyed what I've played so far, and it mostly seems to be in working order, I just haven't seen enough of it to really say one way or the other on the price. But at the beginning here, I'm pretty positive on it. So if you want to learn more, I will try to remember to link it down below for you. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. If you're looking forward to the review of this one, subscribe and stick around. I have at least 2 other things to get to first though, so this might take me a week or 2 to get around to, but it seems like a shorter game. But as I was not planning on this one, it's hard to give an exact timeline. So all of that said, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.